Hello, I'm very lucky last today, so hopefully I can hold your interest for the last bit. As Richard said, I'm working in HIV, I was going to say HIV Alliance instead. I'll start again. With HIV Ireland for the last 10 years. I've been working as a community support worker and a psychotherapist. So I'm going to speak to you a little bit about my experiences of working with people who still, as we talked about today, are experiencing the stigma on a daily basis. So previous to my time working in HIV Ireland, I was working in the homeless services. So I came across a lot of people who had acquired hepatitis C. And they used to often say to me, I have hep C, I don't have the virus. And I used to think, God, it's amazing the difference with the ease with which they could speak about their hepatitis C without any fear of the reaction they might receive, the fear of services being withdrawn, or what might be done with that information in comparison to HIV. So when I began my work with HIV Ireland, I suppose this stayed with me as something quite salient about the difference. And I suppose as part of my induction to the role, I would have heard about the different organisations that would have come together to create the alliance that has now become HIV Ireland, in a time where there was severe need to support and provide care for people, and preparation really, which was the time where people were preparing for death. In the early days, there was no, as Richard has said, there was no hiding of your illness. You physically were manifesting signs that were showing that you had acquired HIV. The fear and the lack of understanding of what HIV was or how it was transmitted from the beginning resulted in a lot of people coming to us having experienced discrimination. So our role in the beginning was very much one of mediation, where we supported them in writing letters of complaint, going with them to speak with the alleged perpetrator of discrimination, and providing any follow-up that might come from that. And a lot of times, all they received might be an apology or having been heard, and at other times they might receive some sort of financial compensation, but generally that would have been an out of court. And we were talking about at the time that this was happening with a variety of people, from pub managers, shopkeepers, taxi drivers, bouncers, prison officers, as well as healthcare professionals who are making judgments based on a person's appearance. So many came telling us of their experiences, but there was a minority who were willing to go forward and make any form of complaint, whether that was they were physically not well enough to do it, to that they actually felt that at that time it wasn't a priority, that they needed to focus on other health-related issues to basically get things in place before they succumbed to AIDS. Our role changed, as it's been said many times today, significantly with the advent of heart medication. So we were moving from a place of preparing people for death to preparing them to live with HIV. And so it was a very big change for our clients, but obviously it was a very big change for us as support workers, that we were moving from a time that had been very bleak to try and move to a time of more optimism. So it was this adjustment for people to feel that no longer was their body physically disclosing their illness, but now they were in the position, which has been said, of choosing when, how, and if they were going to disclose their status. So unfortunately, the experience of discrimination didn't change in the advent of medication. The question of whether to disclose or not almost became more stressful than it had before, because people realized that the actual disclosure could either lead to them not having a home or job, new love or travel of education. To disclose or not disclose could result in any of those. And so, unfortunately, which has been a theme today and echoed very much in what Patrick said, little has changed in terms of stigma in the last 30 years. Our work of support and advocacy continues to deal with the very real impact of a diagnosis. Unlike the early days, we now have the arms of the Work Relations Commission, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the Ombudsman's Office, and the Garda Ombudsman's Office to investigate situations when somebody living with HIV has been treated less favourably than somebody who is negative or their status is unknown. In 2007, a case where chiropodists refused to provide treatment to a person based on them disclosing their HIV status was brought forward to the Equality Tribunal, which is now known as the Work Relations Commission. A landmark ruling was made at this time, and in the case, Jay Goulding was deemed to have experienced discrimination based solely on him disclosing his HIV status. And I suppose that changed how HIV was being seen, that it was seen as something that could not, under the 9 grounds, be discriminated against under the Employment Equality Act and the Equal Status Act. So I'd love to say that that's changed everything and we don't have people coming to us speaking about the discrimination that they feel they've experienced. They still continue to come to us. They come having been left confused, upset, rejected, and trying to make sense of what happened. It's not always clear to them or something that they can comprehend that they've been treated differently, but they're left with a feeling of something's not quite right. And it can be talking to somebody from the outside, such as ourselves, where they come to the realization, yes, I actually have been discriminated against. The majority of the cases that do come forward to me, because many people will ask how many cases come forward, and I would say the number that do, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Many don't make complaints, but come to us and speak informally, looking for acknowledgement that they've been treated differently. There's also a sense of not wanting to draw attention to themselves, to ignore it, that maybe it's expected or even okay, and you just keep going. So you keep going with the weight or the niggle that maybe this diagnosis, I too see myself as a little less deserving. So for some, being heard or acknowledged is enough. That's as far as they want to take it. For others, they write the letter of complaint, they seek the apology, and they feel by being heard by the alleged perpetrator that they've gone some way in having been acknowledged. For others, going forward to the Work Relations Commission and going through mediation and then possible a formal hearing is very important to them, as they're looking for both an acknowledgement for themselves, but also they want for the perpetrator to realise that their treatment and behaviour will hold them accountable, and that there'll be an acknowledgement that this should not have happened. That's the resounding feeling that clients will speak about, that this should not have happened to them, and them going forward with what is a very difficult process is worth it for them in terms of making the sacrifice that they will make to hopefully feel that there could be some change. A lot of clients speak about having been in a very good place with their diagnosis before the incident. Many talk about not having experienced negativity ever before their diagnosis, and they're left with this feeling when they hear things like, you need a specialist service. We wouldn't have the skills to treat you. It's too complex. There could be complications with lots of blood. All staff members would need to know. We have to think of the safety of everyone attending this service in the office. They couldn't stay in this accommodation as they'd be sharing a bathroom. These things are being said by employers, dentists, tattooists, disability organisations, employment centres, housing organisations, to name but a few. These experiences can impact on our clients' mental health, which again has been said throughout the day. It can be as though a dam of emotions just breaks loose and they are just swamped with it, and many would describe that it's like as if it's the day that they were diagnosed all over again. The sense of shame and rejection I hear my clients talk about as a result of their experiences has resulted in many people going through a period of depression, taking time off work, ending relationships, isolating themselves, believing that they are less worthy or deserving, or reinforcing that, anxiety about seeking alternative services, so remaining in pain, feeling really angry, drinking or taking more recreational drugs than they would have before, suicidal thoughts, and are going on or increasing a prescription that they have for antidepressants. I suppose all of that being said, I cannot emphasize enough the impact that these events have on people's mental health. Going through the process is very lengthy. It's slightly speeded up lately, but it's still lengthy. And it's always at the back of our clients' minds. I had a client a couple of years ago who was successful, that he was deemed to have been discriminated against by his dentist. And on our last meeting, he said to me, "I'm actually really looking forward to not hearing from you." And I was like, okay. And he was basically saying it from the angle that he'd be waiting on emails, he'd be waiting on phone calls. So when he saw those from me, it was this constant reminder of what had happened, how he'd been treated, and he basically wanted to move on and not hear from me again. So you can understand that it brings something that happened and it keeps it constantly in the present rather than, so you can see why some people would like to ignore it if they can. There can be a sense that the emotional impact since the event is also not fully assessed by the Work Relations Commission. I would see this. A personal injury claim would probably take the emotional and the psychological impact more into account. But with HIV, again, that there can be a reluctance in going forward because this would be held in a public court where there would be reporting and they could be inadvertently disclosed to the world. Also, in a case where somebody was deemed to have been discriminated against, if the perpetrator reneges on the agreement that comes together in the Work Relations Commission, they would have to then go to the district court to appeal that decision. So again, a public forum, so a lot of our clients would not be willing to go forward with that. So I suppose barriers that are, although not obvious, increase and feed into the stigma that's present. So, like has been said many times today, medical advances have continued, and the advent of medication has brought a place where people were being kept alive, to people starting to feel well, to reducing the fear around transmission that had dominated the sense of self for the person living with HIV, those close to them and wider society. However, the stigma a person feels internally about being infectious, dangerous, and dirty, even with the medical developments, is still with us today. And as much as we would like to believe that that's not held in wider society, our clients are being met with it every day. And it's reinforcing any insecurities or a negative self-image that they may have on themselves, and obviously then impacting on their own mental health. Today is a starting point for a public discussion about the impact of HIV on an individual. Our last campaign in terms of stigma was in 2007 with the Stamp Out Stigma campaign. There needs to be an acknowledgement from the government of the need for an increased mental health resources for people living with HIV across the services that they access. Short-term interventions do not reflect or cater for this lifelong complex condition. We need further resources to be able to provide HIV stigma and awareness training in third level and on-site settings for healthcare, educational and community workers, to name but a few. Laws are present to protect people with HIV, but they do not prevent discrimination taking place. Stigma is insidious and it festers in society and with the mind of the individual. It requires a collective approach to change mindsets. Each of us here today can play a part in our work and personal lives to move this forward through opening, challenging, and continuing discussions on HIV and stigma. Thank you very much.